If you're not seeing any muscle growth in the gym right now, then you're probably making one of these 3 mistakes. Or you're making all 3. But first I'm going to give you a little bit of a background and a bit of an intro into me. Now when I first started I was 15. I started training when I was 15. I am now 27 and I feel like an old man and my joints doing all. I started as a skinny kid when I was 15 and my only intention was to build some muscle and just to be a bit more confident outside of the gym. And I thought to myself, building some muscle would definitely help me do that, and training would definitely help me do that, because I always aspired to look like the men that had a bit of muscle, like the guys that walked into a room and you could just see that they had a bit of confidence from having a certain look. And as an unconfident kid and a kid who lacked a lot of confidence, I felt like that was the thing that I needed and the thing that I was missing. Now I knew that it was going to take a bit of time, but I also thought that it would be quicker than it actually was. But I made so many mistakes for years, and the picture that you're going to see on the left hand side of the screen is me when I first started. I look very different to how I do now, I think anyway. You can let me know in the comments if not. But I actually probably trained for around 6 or 7 years, didn't really get a lot from my training whatsoever. Yeah, I looked a little bit different, but I spent so many years kind of spinning my wheels and not getting anything or as much as I felt like I wanted to out of training, mainly just due to the fact that I wasn't educated. I didn't know what I was doing. When it comes to the YouTube scene and when it comes to the content that was around back in the day, it was all day in the lives and full days of eating, and it weren't really as educational as it is now, and there weren't as much information or knowledge being put out into YouTube or onto Instagram or onto social media platforms like there is now, like with what I'm doing. And my goal and my objective is to make sure that people don't make the same mistakes as me. So let's get into this, and let's get into the first biggest mistake that I feel like I used to make. Now mistake number 1 was definitely my issue with progressive overload and my inability to try and actually track the numbers and push myself in the gym. Now, when it comes to progressive overload, that is going to be the main driver when it comes to actually building muscle and forcing a level of stimulus on the muscle that's going to promote growth. Obviously, food is going to be a massive driver as well, but we're not going to cover that in this video. That's going to be a separate. But progressive overload is coming in many ways, shapes and forms. I used to go in the gym with the intention of just training hard, and my association with hard was just exerting myself as much as possible. So when it comes to the amount of volume that I was doing in the gym, it was probably way more than it should have been for the amount of time that I was training, but it also was kind of my downfall, because I would do 4 or 5 sets. I would just choose random exercises week in, week out, and I wouldn't actually have a set program that I'd follow. I'd kind of do what everyone does when they first start the gym. Chest and arms, back and arms, shoulders and legs, maybe a leg session on its own, and then a bit more arms, and then a lot of abs. That's what I do on a regular basis. Now, I actually had no comprehension or understanding of what progressive overload was, other than the fact that I wanted to lift a lot more weight every single time. And my association with building muscle came down to the amount of load that I was lifting, not necessarily the stimulus that I was placing on the muscle. Like I mentioned, progressive overload comes in many ways, shapes and forms. It's not just the amount of load you're lifting. For me personally, when I used to lift, it was pretty brain dead. And I'm actually going to try and find a clip and put it on the screen. I just go in and fling some weight about and do 3 or 4 sets and just hope for the best. But the issue is I weren't actually placing the stimulus where I needed to. So if I was doing a lat pull down, it would be just a pull down of shit. If I were doing a row, it would just be swinging the bar around. If I do a deadlift, I'd be like a quaver trying to fucking get the bar up. If I were doing a chest press, I'd just think about flinging as much weight up and get my elbows into full extension without any control coming back down either. There was a lot of issues in my training because I was so focused on weight. Now another thing nowadays tends to be people on the other end of the spectrum. Other end of the spectrum basically being the science-based community. And people watching this might actually enjoy the science-based stuff. They might enjoy watching Jeff Nippard. They might enjoy reading the research, and they might enjoy the fact that there is a lot more of an understanding and education around training nowadays than what they used to be. But the issue is, you need to sit in the middle ground, in my opinion. One of the best ways that you can get the most out of your training is going to be by sitting in the middle ground. Not training too far on the end of science-based and control and execution and technique, because then you're not going to put any effort into your actual sets. But also making sure that you don't just train on the other end of the spectrum like the old school bodybuilders, where you just fling a load of fucking weight around and hope for the best. You fuck your joints up, and by the time you get old enough to potentially see enough growth, you're just fucked, because your joints, your elbows, your knees and every other bone and tendon in your body is ruined. There needs to be a fine balance between the two. Execution, technique, time under tension, load. And also sometimes just gripping and ripping it. There does need to be an element of that. And I do believe that that is one of the best things that you can do initially when you do start the gym, because you can teach technique, you can teach exercise execution, you can teach someone how to control a load, but you cannot teach intensity. And I feel like I am happy with the fact that I did used to lift a little bit brain dead initially and learn and made the mistakes along the way, because it allowed me to gauge how to train hard first and then understand technique after. Now, one of the main drivers that I spoke about, progressive overload, I'm just going to go into the brief detail of what you do need to focus on and what I wish I focused on a little bit earlier. Having a set program, making sure that you stick to a set of similar exercises every single week. Can you make swaps and alternatives each week? To an extent, but make sure that there is going to be some similarity between the exercises that you're doing. Next is going to be the amount of sets that you do. 2 sets is great as long as you are pushing yourself to a high level of intensity and the load you are lifting is something that you can tolerate But also, if you can do 3 sets, progressively increase the amount of sets that you do over time to a point where you actually find what your recovery capability. Now, recovery capability is basically when you are training, there is going to be an amount of load or an amount of volume or an amount of sets in total volume that you can tolerate per week until you reach a level of soreness that you can't recover from. Now, a kind of scale that I'd like to use when it comes to recovery is muscle soreness in the amount of days that you are sore. Initially, when you first start training, your soreness is probably going to increase and you're probably going to be sore for a fair few days. As time goes on, you should adjust to the volume you are putting into your program. But if you are sore for more than 2 days at a time, that just means that the amount of volume that you are putting within your sessions at this moment in time is a little bit too much for what you can tolerate. So the sweet spot tends to be 1 to 2 days of soreness and then feeling fresh within that particular area again. So if you wanted to, you could train it again. And then if you are fresh after 2 days, then it's a case of you could potentially increase that volume within your next session. So if you started 2 sets, you then could potentially increase it to 3 sets on a particular exercise. If you then do 3 sets and then you can potentially push it to 4 because your recovery is allowing you to do that, then you can push it to 4. But there is going to be an inverted U when it comes to the amount of volume that you can do in terms of how much effort and intensity you can put into the session. And what I mean by that is, if you can do more than 3 sets on a particular exercise, you are probably just not pushing yourself enough within the sets that you're doing. The working sets that you are doing, the load isn't high enough, the stimulus isn't high enough, and the control isn't necessarily there to a high enough extent to be able to put you in a position where you are stimulating the muscle enough to cause enough muscle damage. As a result of that, you recover quite quickly. So what I want you to focus on instead, if you are going to do a certain amount of sets, a sweet spot mostly is going to be 3 sets, and that needs to be 3 working sets. That doesn't include your warm-up sets. Warm-up sets are going to be totally separate, and they will be more so dominant towards the earlier part of the session when you are getting warm and when you are warming up certain areas of the body for whatever area that you're going to train. But the working sets are going to be the sets that you are going to do to absolute failure. So if you've got 10 to 15 reps to complete in a set, that means that when you reach 15 should be the maximum amount of reps that you can do within a particular session. If you are within a particular set, if you are doing 10 to 12, 10 to 12 is going to be the rep range, 10 being the minimum, 12 being the maximum. If you can do more than 12 in a particular set though, don't stop at 12. Do more than 12 and then make sure that you make a note of the actual load that you lifted that allowed you to be able to get more than 12. So the next time that you do that particular session, you can then increase that load and try to fall within the rep range of 10 to 12. And the same goes for 7 to 9, 6 to 8, whatever rep range that you're going to be following. But the rep ranges are a guide, they are not gospel. If you choose a load and you can do 12 to 15 with that load and that is your rep range and that is the aim of the actual set, great. But if you say, for example, get more than the actual rep range and you're able to get more than the rep range with the amount of load that you've chosen for that particular set, all you do is increase the load in the following set or increase the load the following week if you've not got another set or rep range of 10 to 15. Then if you fall under the rep range and you've got a rep range of 10 to 15 and you only get 8, then you want to make sure that the load that you are lifting isn't too heavy, because you say, for example, might get 10 to 15, but you only might actually get 8 quality reps. If you actually record your sets and understand how you performed a particular set and you realize towards the back end you actually got a lot less out of it because fatigue was setting in and you weren't actually able to stimulate the muscle that you needed to, then it's a case of decreasing the load for the following set and then going again if you've got another set or the following week. Another thing that I want to talk about with progressive overload is going to be the time under tension and execution as well. Like I said, intensity is going to be the biggest driver. Load is going to be a massive driver when it comes to muscle growth. But people forget that execution will allow you to create the environment within a particular muscle group to actually allow your muscles to grow. So if you are doing a lat pull down, the bar up and down, hoping that you're going to be targeting your lats, yeah, to an extent you might be working your lats. But a lot of that tension might be taken away and placed in your biceps, placed in your shoulders or to the upper back and focused on an area that isn't actually meant to be the primary target. The same goes for a chest press. You might do a chest press and potentially start to forget that execution and technique matters, and you increase the load because your ego gets in the way, because at the end of the day, if you're watching this and you want to train and you want to get big, ego can take over, but you need to remove your fucking ego and leave it at the door when you step to the gym. Yeah, the load matters, and yeah, the intensity is sometimes gonna require you to drill the fuck in and put your mind in a place where you're gonna bury yourself. But technique is gonna be the thing, and the execution that you have on an exercise is gonna be the thing that allows you to stimulate the muscle exactly how you need to force growth. So time under tension, execution and technique are gonna be massive drivers of progressive overload that you can also focus on. So if your technique shit the first time you do something, then another thing that you want to focus on isn't just increasing the load and hoping for the best. It's going to be allowing yourself to get better at a particular exercise over time so that you can progressively overload the particular muscle that you're trying to target. And that is going to be number one. Progressively overload the body and the muscle tissue that you are trying to grow. Now, I know I said I was going to cover this in another video, but nutrition is going to be a massive driver when it comes to muscle growth. I want to break it down in simple terms right now, and there's going to be an actual video that's going to cover this in a bit more detail. But one thing that actually held me back for years is going to be nutrition. I went up and down in weight so much, and I was never willing to be able to push myself enough in any phase to allow myself to grow. When the most important thing is going to be sitting in a surplus for as long as you physically can without allowing yourself to get too fucking fat. And I would always get a little bit too fat a little bit too quick because I wouldn't eat clean enough or have enough control of my food to allow myself to build enough muscle. And the food that I was eating was not good enough quality to allow me to have the energy that I needed to perform well in the gym. A massive factor when it comes to your ability to build muscle is a calorie surplus and allowing your body to be within a small calorie surplus over a significant period of time. Now, when it comes to the amount of time that you spend in the surplus, it's going to be for the amount of time that you can realistically tolerate. One thing a majority of people make the mistake with, firstly, is going to be starting a bulk in a very poor physical position. Your body composition is not in a good enough state to start a bulk. Now, I'm going to give you a specific example of what I mean by that. That picture on the left-hand side is me, where I would potentially wanted to have started a bulk in the past. Now, the issue with that is I was carrying a little bit too much body fat. My appetite was already fairly low. My routine was shit. My lifestyle wasn't the best. And as a result of that, if I did start a bulk, that bulk would be short-lived because I would gain a little bit too much fat too quick because there's no routine. The appetite isn't there to be able to eat enough food, and my ability to digest food properly isn't there. What you first need to do, and the majority of people need to do, is probably go into a bit of a diet. Now, the means of going into a diet is dependent on what your body fat percentage is right now. If you are someone that was skinny like me when I started at 15, then obviously you need to go straight to a bulk. But if you are someone that's carrying a little bit too much body fat or you're skinny fat, you potentially want to put yourself into a bit of a deficit. Now, that deficit and the amount of time that you spend in a deficit is going to be relative to the amount of body fat you carry. If you're someone that's just relatively overweight, probably just needs to drop 4 to 5 to 6 kilos, then it could be a shorter diet, short, sharp and aggressive, and 4 to 6 weeks. If you're someone that's carrying a lot more body fat, and I mean someone that needs to drop 10 to 15 to 18 kilos, then it's not a case of going into a surplus and building muscle. It's a case of going into a deficit and getting the weight off, but do it in a manner where it's going to be sustainable for you. I find that people with more experience do have a better ability to be able to stick to a plan and be more adherent and actually get the fat off in a more aggressive manner. But people that don't have the experience, that haven't actually got the lifestyle in place, that haven't really ever successfully completed a diet or don't have a good solid routine, will potentially need more time. So even if, say for example, you do only have 5 to 6 kilos to come off, your routine and your lifestyle might not necessarily allow it. You might not be able to go for an aggressive approach. So you might have to go for a longer diet, and that diet could be 10 to 12 to 15 to 16 weeks, 18 weeks, if needed, longer. Having diet breaks in between to allow you to have that sustainability. Now, diet break is going to be something that I actually do want to cover in a lot more detail in a separate video, but essentially what it is, it's taking time away from a deficit, taking time away from a diet, and just bringing your food back up. It doesn't mean eating like a dickhead, it doesn't mean having no control. It just means that you are spending a period of time away from being in a calorie deficit. But that's the main thing when it comes to building muscle. Your nutrition, filling your body with good quality whole foods, making sure that you're sitting in a small surplus. And the actual surplus doesn't need to be hefty. It doesn't need to be a crazy amount of calories. It just needs to be enough that's going to allow you to have a significant amount of energy, that's going to actually help you have the energy to perform well in the gym and to stimulate the muscle properly without putting yourself into a significant surplus that's going to allow you to gain too much fat too quick or too much weight too quick, that then is going to shorten the runway progression for the amount of time that you can spend in that surplus. So let's break that down. Firstly, you're probably going to need to go into a bit of a diet or even sit in a maintenance period or maintenance block with your food, and then build up a solid routine with the meals that you're eating. Then once you have dieted, if you need to diet for 6 to 8 weeks, then again, you diet for 6 to 8 weeks, you pull off the amount of body fat that you need to pull off. And again, this is going to be relative to the individual. If you need specific help on this, I will leave the coaching link in the bio, or even we could just have a consultation and I'll give you some ideas of what you need to potentially do. And that's totally free. Coaching itself, obviously that's more one-to-one. So obviously if you want that, we'll have to pay for that. But that's going to be in the description anyway. But once we've stepped out of the diet and you've got to the body fat percentages needed to be able to stimulate growth and to sit in a good quality surplus and have that runway of progression, then we need to move into a surplus and spend as much time there as we physically can. Now, again, I do want to make this clear. A surplus and a gaining phase or improvement phase or a bulk or whatever you want to call it is not an opportunity to eat what the fuck you want. You don't have a bunch of kebabs and eat McDonald's and eat fucking takeaways a couple of times a week. What we need to focus on is eating good quality food and actually just enjoying the meals, whole foods that are going to digest really well, that you can actually stick to, obviously, because that's going to be the primary factor. If you can't sustain it and you can't stick to it and you can't adhere to it, you're not going to enjoy your time and you ain't going to fucking want to do it. But there needs to be a degree of restriction that allows you to still have some sustainability. We want to keep hunger present, we want to keep appetite good, and we want to keep digestion in a relatively good spot throughout the process so that we can utilize and metabolize the food to use in the gym as our main driver for performance improvements. And then obviously we have a bit of balance on top of that as well, which is going to come in the form of like takeaways and pizzas and things like that. But we need to make sure that we have a level of control there, because if it does become a free-for-all and food does become sloppy and your routine becomes out of whack, and you can't actually stick to good quality whole foods anymore because you've ruined your digestion, you've ruined your appetite, then that again is where we are going to shorten the amount of progression that we can make and the level of time that we can spend in a surplus. But again, one issue that I used to have when it comes to staying in a surplus for a long period of time was pushing myself out of my comfort zone. There's going to come a point where you probably are going to struggle to eat the food. You're probably going to get a little bit uncomfortable. You're probably going to gain a little bit more body fat. But if you are gaining strength, if you are getting stronger, if you are performing better in the gym, then they are metrics that you need to take consideration towards. But we need to make sure that we're tracking this to allow ourselves to know if we're doing that. Same goes for dieting. If you don't spend long enough in diet or you don't get yourself lean enough, you aren't going to be in a position where you can grow for long enough. So either phase is going to have to get uncomfortable at points. Dieting, you are probably going to have to push and get uncomfortable. Gaining, you're probably going to have to push and get uncomfortable. But growth does not come from comfort. Growth comes from pushing yourself out your comfort zone consistently in the gym and outside the gym with what you do with your routine and what you do with your food, your habits, your lifestyle. It is meant to be hard. Building muscle is hard. Spending time in the surplus is hard. Dieting is hard. Changing your body and changing your life is hard. But let me tell you from personal experience, the level of discipline that you show yourself and the level of intensity that you place in the gym and the routine that you build from training, the routine that you build from your nutrition, eating good quality whole foods on a consistent basis is going to change your fucking life. So make sure you give yourself that time to be better. You give yourself that time to improve. And that's number 2, nutrition. Third and final point when it comes to actually building muscle and getting the most out of your muscle building journey is going to be, I fucking hate saying that, but muscle building journey, because at the end of the day we're always going to want to build a little bit more muscle. You're never going to be satisfied, but a massive part of it is going to be your rest and recovery. Now again, using personal experience, when I first started training and I actually got into the gym and I really started to enjoy the process, I thought more days in the gym equaled more muscle. Far from the truth. Like I said, when it comes to your ability to build muscle, you do need to focus on recovery. The recovery aspect is going to allow you to actually build the muscle. Now recovery comes in the form of making sure that you get adequate rest in between sets, and that means probably resting between 1 minute and 30 seconds to 2 to 3 minutes per set, again relative to the exercise, but ideally give yourself 90 seconds rest in between each set. The next thing, don't train 6-7 days a week. If you can train 6 or 7 days a week, I'm going to ask you the question of, are you training hard enough? Is the intensity in the gym high enough for you to actually get the most out of your training? Because I can train about 5 days a week in the gym tops before I start to feel like I'm fucking battered. And I've got a good routine where it's 2 days on and 1 day off, or 3 days on and 1 day off. But the most amount of sessions that I will do in one sitting is going to be 3. I cannot train 6-7 days in the week anymore like I used to. I feel like one thing that held me back for a long time was going to be training 7 days a week. I used to think no rest for the wicked, more gains come from more training sessions, and I needed to do that to grow. But in reality, I just feel like it kept me small for a long time. And again, I'll put pictures on the screen as reference points for how I looked for a long time. And recovery is going to be one of your best mates, but intensity is going to be the driver. Nutrition is going to fuel the performance in the gym to be able to stimulate, provide that environment to grow, and the recovery aspect and the rest that you take in between sessions is going to be the thing that's going to allow the muscles to repair and then to grow and put you in a better position to actually build the muscle that you want to build. The first and most important thing is going to be progressively overloading the muscle and making sure that you are doing that in the form of the load that you lift in, the time and attention, the execution of exercises. That is going to be crucial. Second thing is going to be nutrition. If you are not fueling your body correctly, if you are not giving your body the whole foods that it needs to be able to fuel your body to perform in the gym, and you're just getting fat and sloppy and out of shape, then you aren't going to build the muscle, but your body is going to become less sensitive to the food, and you're also not going to be able to digest the food to allow it to be metabolized to stimulate the muscle properly in the gym and be used for training performance. You can't use what you can't digest. So the foods that you eat matters. The amount of food that you eat matters. If your food is up and down like this, you are not going to be in a consistent surplus, and you are not going to allow your body to be able to grow. And the third point, rest and recovery. Do not train 6-7 days a week. Make sure that you have a split that you can stick to. 3, 4 or 5 days is more than enough. And make sure within each and every session you are giving everything to each and every single session and allowing your body to recover through rest periods between sets, generally going to be 90 seconds. And when it comes to the amount of time that you spend in the gym, that doesn't matter. It's about making sure that the total amount of volume within your sessions and sets and total exercises is going to be enough that you can actually recover from without being sore for days on end. So they're going to be the 3 things that you're potentially not doing right now or making a mistake with. And it might be one of those things, it might be 2 of those things, or it might be all 3 of those things. But they are going to be the main and most important things when it comes to building muscle that's going to allow you to not stay stuck and in the same position that I was for so many fucking years. Now, if you found this useful, then please do me a favour. Just do me a favour. 1 favour, and all I'm going to ask for is 2, or 2 actually. 2. So if you found this useful, then make sure you do me a favour and like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and I'll catch you in the next video.